Cyberpunk Uncensored.
Hello, welcome everybody to Tales from the Forlorn Dopes, hosted by Cyberpunk Uncensored. I am one of your hosts, Cybersmily.
I am the other host, Wisdom.
So, I think this week we're going to kind of delve into both Wisdom's and I's process for how we do campaigns and how we kind of run Cyberpunk. Figured that would be an interesting subject for now. Anything you want to talk about before we get into that topic?
Quick recommendation: go see Black Widow. It's a pretty good movie.
Okay.
If you like the Marvel movies, if you like espionage, it's good stuff. Yeah.
Cool. Is it in the theaters or is it just on Disney Plus?
It's in the theaters. That's where I went and saw it. Still chewing on this bucket of popcorn from the other day. It's in the theaters. It's on Disney Plus. I very much recommend going to the theater to see anything, really. Like, go back to the theaters, people. They're dying. They need your help. It's if you've been vaccinated, go see them. Hell, go during a matinee. We were the only people in the theater. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, Disney Plus, it's like $30, and I know matinees are a hell of a lot cheaper than that.
I mean,
yeah,
I like watching stuff from the comfort of my own home too. But yeah, if you love movies and you love if you love the movie theater experience, save it while you can.
Cool. I got a bit of news. I just pushed out a couple little tweaks to my site, specifically some random rolling for like the fashion generator and the fixer contacts.
Did you
go ahead?
Did you post that anywhere? I missed that. I need to check that out.
I haven't posted it, so you guys get the exclusive.
Okay, you're. Woohoo!
Yeah, I just posted it right before this. I wanted to get it deployed over the weekend, but wasn't able to get to it. So go check it out. I still have a backlog of various other enhancements I'm working on. So we'll see how that goes.
Still slowly trudging away, inch by inch. That's as much as I can stand to sit in front of a keyboard on the Spy source book I'm working on, the Glass Road source book. The Nomad campaign that I'm running right now is going pretty well. If anybody out there wants to have a guest appearance, get a hold of me. I'm open to such things. The whole campaign is kind of based around it being open to that. It's basically like the Nomad Greyhound bus, and each leg of the journey between the various Nomad markets is across the United States is basically a session or an adventure arc, and it's geared so that people can guest star.
Yeah,
make cameos.
I got to figure out what time and schedule it with you and get myself thrown into that for one or two sessions.
Yeah, I'm kind of right now. We're playing on Fridays, Friday evenings. I'm kind of wanting to maybe switch to Mondays because I have to wake up and take my brother to work on Fridays, and I have a fucked up sleep schedule. It's that could be a whole session in and of itself that nobody wants to hear. But yeah,
All right.
as of now, we're doing it on Fridays.
Yeah, I think I can probably make myself available 1 or 2 Fridays in the near future. So because we talked about campaigns, let's talk about campaigns and kind of what our process is when we're developing campaigns. Again, what we suggest is you can take it or leave it. Everyone's different and everyone has their own process to create art. And by all means, don't think this is God-written rules that you must apply to, but hopefully it gives you some insight into how we develop it. So I'll start it off. So with my process, I have 2 ways of going. One is, and this is not just for Cyberpunk, this is for any of the games I've run in the past. Most of the times, it's players getting together. If it's spur of the moment, I kind of let the players dictate where the campaign's going and give me the guidance of what they're looking for versus something that I have planned and kind of have like a story plot in the works. So when it comes to the players' motivation, I usually am just pretty open to whatever they want to do, whatever kind of quests they want to go on or achievements they want to do. So I kind of concentrate more on what the characters are looking for, and talk to the players and see where they're seeing where the campaign wants to go, versus going it my way, which is I kind of set up a goal or a general achievement, whether it's trying to save the world or save themselves. But with that kind of campaign, I do take into the players' comments and try to kind of weave in my own story, and see if I can gear them towards the story I'm looking to create, which is always kind of a fine balance. Now, of course, when I first started DMing and GMing, that was not the case of how I do it today. It took many failed games as well as successful games to figure out exactly where I wanted to go. I think in my beginning days when I was a wee child, it was more or less, the Monty Hall smash and grab, create a dungeon that made absolutely no sense, and run those through. And then slowly building up, I'd like to add this element, and starting to create NPCs where the players would, eventually end up going either into the town or a bar they frequent, or even getting involved with like the local politics. And that kind of evolved. It took me probably, I would say, a good 7 years from when I first started gaming to really get into more storytelling than just playing, right? So in the beginning, it was very much like video games are today.
I empathize with you so much.
So it can to be a long process. Some people can do it a lot quicker. But I would suggest not overlooking just having fun. And if you're thinking about creating a masterpiece in the beginning, it's going to not be a masterpiece.
Masterpiece. I have chased that white buffalo.
Yeah. So always keep in mind that players are always going to not ruin, but change the game in your campaign.
No, they will ruin your plans. Like, you will have some plans, you will chuckle over them late into the evening, pour over maps, and then first 5 minutes of the next game, you might as well throw all that shit in the toilet because your players have gone off and done something utterly goofy.
Yep. And to me, that's the other problem, I think, in the beginning was any of those, my grand masterpiece or my grand story that I was going to tell. Like to your point, was just like, oh, throw it all away. However, don't, right? Always keep that stuff locked
don't
away.
actually throw it away. Like,
and keep it around.
You can always just change. You can give them the illusion of, which door leads to what. Like, oh, there are 5 doors. They all lead to different resolutions. They all lead to the same resolution. Trust me.
Yep.
You're the GM. You have that power.
And I think to Furious George point, in my beginning as a GM, I did a lot of one-shots, right? So it was more buying a module or, getting some other quick, dirty adventure just to run quickly and get the players at least involved and complete it. Because sometimes, back in those days, I was lucky to have a constant stream of players, but not all players are going to be around at specific times. So one-shots are often good, especially if you don't know when you're going to play next or when you're going to get the group together again. So that's kind of my start on the whole campaign process. What do you got?
I'm the complete opposite. I don't think with the exception of some Halloween games I've run, which were just pure, let me throw as much horror at the character as possible, or at the players, I should say. I don't really do one-shots. I've never gone to a gaming convention and like run a game at a con. Well, that's not true. I did it once. Didn't enjoy it. I don't do one-shots. Gaming, the games you run, everybody runs games that cater to what they're looking for in a game. And for me, what I'm looking for more than anything is telling a story based around the characters, having those characters grow. I see the appeal of one-shots. I see, like, if you've got, like, 8 hours to kill at a convention or something like that, or even just with your friends, and you want to basically tell a one-off, like, movie. If you want to give your characters, like, a movie experience. I see that. I get it. I understand it. It's just not my thing. I prefer, like, the television experience or the comic book series experience where it's an ongoing story. I like the small moments with characters. That's why I actually prefer running smaller groups. Like 2 to 3 people, that's optimal for me. Now, I'll run larger groups because, hey, who doesn't want a larger audience? Who doesn't want more to pull from? But I find that the smaller the group, the more quality, like, role playing you get. You get to focus more on the character. And what I like to do when I'm starting a campaign is I like to ask my players what they see as their character's potential. Like, what do they want their character to accomplish? What moments do they want their character to experience? Not anything specific, but I had a case in point. I had a character who was I had a player who was they were a little bit socially awkward, but they wanted to play like a vamp, sexy, seductress type character. And as much as I love this person, they really, it was not in their real life forte of how to do that. But I figured what they were trying to do is they were trying to use the game to kind of maybe learn how to do that and how to recognize that and how to incorporate that into their real life experience. So I geared, like, these things that the player didn't understand. I geared the game to where it was simple roles, and then I would explain, what the actions that they were actually doing. I tried to help them in that regard. Or I've got another player who's, you know what? I'm getting off on a tangent.
But that's fine.
I really just wanted to focus to say that what you really want to do is you want to talk to the players, find out what they see as their characters, like help them reach their character's potential. And that could be something as simple as, when I was playing my Nomad character, my favorite character of all time, really what his potential was, the moments that I wanted to see him just on the side of the road, camping out next to his car, the wind in his hair, moments like that. I wanted him to, like, get in kung fu fights against overwhelming odds. Things like this. It wasn't anything big. It was just little small moments that I wanted him to experience. For big stuff's going to come in the game. Like if your player says, "Well, I want to get a big honking gun," I'm like, well, that's probably going to happen anyway. But it's the little moments. It's that bit of potential that when you picture your character in your head, what do you picture him doing? How do you picture him spending his time? That kind of shit's important to me. I like that.
Yep. Yeah, and I think...
And you don't get that a lot with the smaller games. You have to run a campaign for that to really take effect and for it to be meaningful.
Yeah, and I think there's certain players that, at least in my experience, often don't really do their character development, right? Like, what does my character want in life?
Yeah.
And where does he want to go?
And that's okay, too. I mean, There's going to be characters who all they want is the next combat. I mean, Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition was an entire system geared towards that mindset of let's just move this shit along from one combat to the next. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's a reason a lot of people play video games and all that other stuff. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and you can run a role-playing game like that. You can play in a role-playing game like that. But for the people who do want a deeper experience than just fighting, make that available to them. Cater to that, because that's where the real reward as a GM comes from.
Yep.
I talk a lot about my distaste for adversarial GMs. And I let people know up front when I'm getting ready to run a game that I'm not one of those guys. Like, I'm not out to screw your character. I'm not out to, it's not a competition between us. I'm out to tell a story with you as a participant in that storytelling process.
Right.
And I take that role very seriously.
And how do you address, like, certain, and again, you're playing with certain friends, when you deal with certain friends, and I've been in that situation, right, where I should say my youth, I was a little more adversarial than I am today. But today, it's not so much that I'm adversarial as, yes, I'm trying to tell a good story, but I'm also trying to present at least some hardships to the players,
sure.
Right? And
I mean,
I've had players view that as an adversarial role. Like, why did you do that to my character? Or why is this happening to my character? And oftentimes I reply, well, you either did something that caused it, right? So this is a consequence of your actions. Or B, there was something in your character that you've told me that this can be a problem. And I think with Cyberpunk, I take it a little darker because that's the world you live in, right? Where I have no problems.
It's just part of the plot, and you can either roll with it and get on board and roll with it, or not. That's that's entirely your buy-in.
And with the life path, okay, if characters have friends, those friends can be jeopardized, right, by their adversaries.
Absolutely.
or family, or even, you know, the lovers that they have in their life path. So it's they often view it as like, I just want, you know, I want to run that part of my life path, but the reality is the world doesn't work that way, at least in my cyberpunk worlds.
Yeah,
Often
that's why it's so important for the GM to be involved in that character creation process.
Yep.
So everybody on board so everybody's on board with, you know, you don't get to choose this stuff. You don't get to decide, you know, necessarily who your parents are.
Yep.
These are the shitty things that happen to you when you grow up. These are the awesome things that happen to you when you grew up. That randomness guided by the GM, so the GM can like cater it and manicure it to that character and to the game he wants to play, and the game the GM wants to run. That's where the magic happens. Like sometimes I get more excited running life path for a character than I do in whole sessions of actually running the game.
Yep. I agree.
Because it's potential gets me excited, like in the most basic and deepest of ways.
Exactly. And for those who either run Red or have run Cyberpunk 2020, I think Cyberpunk 2020 gave a little more richer life path. Red kind of does that, but I think you really need to tweak some of the numbers. Like, I know for enemies, lovers, and friends, basically you roll a d10 and -7, and that's how many you get. I find that I'd rather have those people. So either roll a d4 with a -1 or a d6 and -3 on it, giving them more of a chance of the players having those background and those assets that you can use to weave a better story. And also with those friends, enemies, and lovers, you know, you have buy-in from the player, right? So the player isn't going to ignore his friend. They're not going to ignore their lover, or even turn an enemy into a friend, right? Maybe there's a common cause that they have. So that you're able to weave it. When it comes to roles, right? So I know certain roles have who's gunning for you. So that's always useful, especially when you're looking to, or when I get into, you know, I don't have a necessarily campaign goal, but if a player has somebody gunning for them, either a big corporation, that usually can turn into a great campaign, because the other players will also flock to support that player.
It's just more ammunition for the storytelling. The storytelling love gun you want to fire at your characters. Yeah.
Right. So,
as if I can be a little bit vulgar.
Yeah. And that's the one great thing about Cyberpunk, when it introduced life paths, and allowing and giving a GM kind of that ability to base campaigns off of what they roll up. And you can just create campaigns just on life path.
Yeah. I mean, good Lord. If you can't get inspired just by making a few rolls on life path, I don't know what to tell you. You have the tools to create the story at any given moment. If there is a side thing going on and you just are stuck for ideas, throw some dice down on a random life path generator, and you'll have some good stuff. You'll at least use that to create your main enemies, or just random schmuck. Like life path is I cannot understate how great of a tool life path is.
Yep. So, speaking of like enemies and NPCs, and how much of the world do you usually flesh out for your campaign before you think is enough?
I spent the first 20 years of my game, of my GMing experience, running everything just straight off the cuff. I never had any kind of idea for what was happening beyond, every now and then I'll make up an enemy, or every now and then I'll have a plan that like this event is going to happen. But for the most part, it's all just like making it up as I go along. And I became really, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but that's, hell, even today, that's still the crutch I fall back onto, is just making it up as I go along. But nowadays, I like to put more thought into it. I may not write shit down. Like you'll never see me like fully flesh anything out until it's time to write the source book for it, which is usually after the campaign is already ended. But nowadays, yeah, I'll create some NPCs. I'll have a list of events that are going to happen. Greater story arcs are going on in my head. So yeah, I mean, I've fleshed out the world itself is separate from the game that I'm running. The game that I'm running is all about the story and shit like that. The world, you might have noticed my website. I like to flesh the world out a lot. And all that, anything that's on my website, pretty much, anything that I've written anyway, gets incorporated into the game in one way or another.
Yeah, so for me, and again, it depends on the campaign, right? Is it a campaign based on my story, or is it a campaign based on the players? If it's my story, I at least try to flesh out the kind of overarching of various plot points I want to at least hit before the end of the campaign. If there's any major NPCs, I will actually take the time to flesh them out. And when I say major NPCs, I mean the major NPCs that I am going to insert into the story. Now, the players might deviate and from what I have and the plot points that I put out. So those NPCs are kind of like off the cuff. And there is that improv skill that every GM, especially good GMs, really need to understand how to at least... And the problem with improv is sometimes as a GM you can take it a little too far and derail everything. And that's always a kind of a hard lesson to learn.
Like if you ever see your GM start sweating and acting really weird, it's because he's worried that he might have just derailed his own campaign, and he doesn't know. He's trying to figure out how to get it back on track.
Yeah, and there's no backsies.
Once
no
you
save points.
Once you let those monsters out of the box, it is real work trying to stomp them back in.
Yep. But even if it does go off the rails, and you possibly have a TPK or something else, you can always start the game again, right? And have either new players and definitely new characters who are trying to achieve the same goal. And you can kind of continue that, right?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. In fact, the Nomad game that I was talking about earlier, the one I'm running now, is me. It's a redo of a game I tried to run a few years ago, where me and the players, just for whatever reason, weren't really on the same page. And a lot of that's my fault. I didn't pay as much attention during character creation as I should have. Running a highly social campaign where the characters are supposed to like interact with the NPCs and all that doesn't work if absolutely every single one of your players has somehow ended up with I hate people, kill them all, leave them to the cockroaches, antisocial fucking bastards. And it just doesn't work.
Yeah, my current campaign, I'm kind of doing the same thing, in which a campaign kind of failed. This was a long time ago. The campaign kind of teetered out because some of the players died, and it kind of fell apart after that, because not all players appreciate, the lethality of cyberpunk at times. So I kind of lost all those players, and to me that story was never finished, and I wanted to finish it, and that's when I kind of picked it up, right, from them, or from there, right. It's one of those stories that I've always wanted to kind of complete and get done with, because a lot of times some campaigns just never get finished, and I always hate that.
Yeah, that missed potential, that it didn't, because I run such long open-ended campaigns. Like there's never an end of campaign moment for any of the games I run. We run those characters until we decide we want to run different characters, basically. Sometimes the story has an end. The Glass Road campaign, it definitely has an end eventually. They're nowhere close to getting there. But yeah. But for the most part, it's all open-ended, and I'm running it like a comic book, where, this story arc ends, obviously. The next one begins, and usually there's 2 or 3 story arcs going on at any given moment. Hey, chase this serial killer. Hey, help the little girl find her puppy, whatever. Help the corporation steal the top secret recipe. Something's going on. But if a campaign ends prematurely because people have to, people move or they can't play anymore, it always aches in your heart. Like, that character had potential that it hadn't reached. The players had moments for their characters that they wanted to experience and they never got to. There was a friend of mine ran a game where I was playing a super spy, and that's why I'm running a super spy campaign, or not necessarily running one, but that's why I'm writing a super spy source book right now, is because I didn't get to scratch that itch fully. Between my living situation changing drastically and having to move across town, the campaign came to an abrupt screeching halt, and it never got to live up to its potential, and that still aches at me. I still look at that character, I look at the drawings I made of that character, and it hurts that I don't get to play him ever again.
The one thing I kind of like, and something that I'm kind of envious of the gaming, the up and coming, gamers of today, is the technology that they have now, with, Discord, the various virtual tabletops you can play with, Zoom, and all these ways in which you can communicate and actually schedule games where you don't care where the player is. Yes, it's from an old school point of view, it was always nice to have, people sitting around, chatting, sharing snacks. But to me, this new technology has brought a big change, especially since coronavirus, in which games are no longer, you don't need to be in a physical location. And I think...
Yeah, but it's still preferable. I love running online. I love having the freedom to do so. But once a week, I still get together. I'm able to get together with real life friends again and game that way, and it's a completely different experience. I love them both. I definitely don't want to ever stop gaming in person.
Right.
There's a cartoon that's going along, a little meme where, this GM wants to get a role-playing group back together again after the pandemic, and they're like, "Why would you want to? We can bring our own snacks. We can game at our leisure." Nobody has to like drive across town, and at the end of the thing, he's like, mostly I just really miss the hugs. And yeah, I missed. This last year has been really tough on me.
Yeah,
I am antisocial as a general policy. Like I suffer anxiety, and I'm just not big on strangers and crowds and all that. But when it comes to my friends, they're what keep me going. They're what keep me alive. So This last year has been very difficult.
Yeah, I think it's been difficult for a lot of people. But I think it shows that, from a campaign point of view, and that's the one thing I find a problem with, especially with this the virtual tabletop, right? Is if I'm going to do a campaign, I have to do a little more work than I would have to do if it was an in-person thing, right? So specifically around like generation of maps, and also trying to deal with any of the assets you got to configure within these virtual tabletops. So I view, and I should say that I think it impedes my improv skills, and I'm sure it's kind of impeded some of yours. Granted, you can always do the theater of the mind. I cannot
figure out Roll20 to save my fucking life.
Yeah, there's quite a few people who can't understand it either, and then you have the other ones that are out there, which some have a little easier in doing certain things and harder in others. But to me, it's just difficult to try to do all that upfront work, especially when there's always that chance the player might, or the players might, completely avoid all that work you've done and pre-planned.
Always the danger.
Yeah, Obsolete Enigma brought up a good point about not finding real space groups to play with. Yeah, that's kind of
difficult.
It is difficult, especially if you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons.
I mean, I'm lucky enough that 90% of the real life friends I have are through gaming. Hell, 100% of the friends I have are either through gaming, comic books, or weird cinema. Like that's the three pillars of my friendships with people, and everybody's on it to one extent or the other. And gaming is really the biggest part of it because it's the glue that holds my friends together. Even the ones who don't actively game anymore, we still talk about games. So I've been really lucky in that regard. If you have real life friends, Obsolete, try just sliding some game into them one at a time. See if they're interested in running being run on a solo adventure. I don't know.
Yeah, it's difficult to convince certain players to change the system, right? I've experienced it plenty of times in which, players are diehard D&D players, they do not play anything else, and they do not want to learn anything else. It is. But you can always, especially in certain groups, there's always that the GM of D&D, or at least the GMs I've dealt with, have always looked to take a break.
Yep.
When I suggest cyberpunk, they might not like the idea, but they're willing to try it to at least take a break, because some of them have been running for years at a time and don't get a chance to play. Some
and I have a
GMs,
friend who plays. He literally plays nothing but D&D. But when I say he's into D&D, I don't mean it's just a casual thing. Like this guy has owned original Elmore art. That's how into D&D he is. It took me 20 years, but I finally got him to at least try Interlock Unlimited, using it to run a side campaign of Dungeons and Dragons. Now it didn't last, but it was a personal triumph of mine. Like, under the right circumstances, you just keep poking that bear, and eventually the bear will take a bite of whatever bait you're throwing out there. Hopefully, maybe someday.
Yeah, and I cannot preach or broadcast as much as I can, but if you have a good FLGS, that has games, schedule a cyberpunk game.
Yeah,
you'll find some players, and again, that's part of the process. You might find some players that you just don't click, but you might find some players that do. And it may not be immediate. You may have to wait a while, but eventually somebody at least is going to be curious enough about a new system and looking for a game that's not totally full already. People will try it out, even if it's not their first instinct. Like, they'll try it out. Because gaming in person, it's the way. Yep. And that's the other thing, right? If you're not out there trying to promote it, and it's going to be hard, especially if you've never run and you want to play Cyberpunk and no one's around to play Cyberpunk. Try running it at a local game store. A lot of them are very opening and welcoming to new systems and new GMs. I've been, granted, I'm a kind of a big old fart, so I really haven't gone to game stores in a while. But recently, within the past couple of years, I started going to those games because one of my friends kind of said, "Hey, there's a D&D game going, and I'm in it, and do you want to play? Because there's room." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Same with Cyberpunk. Basically, same friend was like, "Hey, at this other gaming store, this guy's starting up a Cyberpunk campaign. Do you want to join?" And it's like, "Oh, hell yeah." And that's how I met that person and kind of formed the group I am playing with now. So always be open to try to, and not, you might have one gaming store locally, but don't, if you have a couple in your area, and when I say in your area, like, less than an hour's drive, go to each one and test it out. If you do run a game and you are new, I strongly suggest that you pick up a pre-made adventure. And when I say pre-made adventure, I mean not the scream sheets in the basic book, but actually go to like Drive-Thru RPG, and Atlas Games has quite a few scenarios.
My suggestion is pick up Tales from the Forlorn Hope.
That's a good one too.
That's a fantastic one. Night City Stories. These are anthologies they're just full of little short adventures, but there's enough there, and they're fleshed out enough that it'll give you the boost you need to start. That's not how I started running. Like I said, everything in my head, everything for me was just make it up as I go along. As an older GM now, I look at that stuff and then I'm like, man, I should have been using these tools from the start for more than just maps and basic premises. Some of those adventures are really good. They will give you the boost you need. They will teach you how to run a game. It's I can't overstate their usefulness. Even if you don't run the adventure as written, it's good to have that resource. It's good to have a well of ideas that you can pull from at any time you need it.
All right, so right now is video buffering using low latency. So let's try, because some people are having problems with latency. What I'm going to do is I am going to drop out of Twitch, but we're going to still be broadcasting.
Okay.
I'm going to go get my tablet and watch Twitch from the tablet, so hopefully maybe that'll improve the latency. Alright, so if you want to chat a little while and give me about 2 minutes and I will be back.
Absolutely. The basic premise of our podcast today was supposed to be, how we approach creating a campaign or prepping for one or whatnot. For me, I get an idea and I'll be watching a show or a movie and I'll see a moment that it's always like some small little nothing that inspires whatever campaign I'm going to run. The Nomad campaign I'm running, it was inspired by this little throwaway bit on the show called Defiance. Just one episode centered around a bus going from, like, the characters getting on a bus across the wasteland from one place to the next. And it reminded me of a movie with Michael Ironsides called Neon City, which, again, centered on the characters all being on a bus, moving in between cities. And I was like, that's a whole campaign right there. After years of having just an idea in the back of my head about Glass Road and the ruins of the Middle East, and I never could figure out how I was going to approach that, like what tact I was going to take, what point of view. I watched Damnation Alley, and that gave me, like, okay, well, we're just going to take that on. It's going to be like a corporate, like, just the idea of they live inside this giant van truck thing, cruising across the wasteland, just exploring. That appealed to me. So that's how I fleshed out Glass Road, and it became the campaign where they were looking for smuggling routes, or not smuggling routes, trade routes through the irradiated wasteland of the Middle East.
Hey,
that's
back.
how I approach creating a game now, as at this point in my GMing career, I say, with finger quotes and all that. But yeah, take inspiration where you can, expand on it where you can. You'd be surprised how often, once you flesh out the smallest idea in your head, how quickly everything else falls into place for you as far as...
Derek, we're coming in pretty broken for them. There's something going on with buffering and latency.
Well, that's no good.
No, it's no good. Let's see if...
Is it more me, or is it more Smiley? Is it both of us?
It's kind of both of us. I think it's the stream that's coming through. What I can try to do is let's get rid of video and see if less images being published will fix it. The music, the characters, running everything, just restart there. Yeah, because I'm seeing it on my... Yeah, it's lagging pretty bad.
Oh man, I told you every episode something comes out of nowhere and hits us.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Space junk hit the satellite. I told you that was going to happen.
Chinese hackers. So what I'm doing is, so I had that video running in the background. I'm just removing it to see if that will be a
Help
little
it all.
better. Yeah. That's that.
I'll agree with you on that, George. Cyberpunk is the one for me. It's been the one for me since basically 1990. I've played other games. I've played many, many, many other games, but it all comes back down to Cyberpunk. I would never rewrite the rules for another game to flesh them out or streamline them like I did for Interlock Unlimited. Any other game, if I didn't like the way the rules went, I'd just stop playing that game. The fact that I've taken so much time and put so much of my life towards Cyberpunk 2020 is testament to how strong of a system it is, how it does the things that enable me to tell the stories in the game that I want to tell. And at the end of the day, that's all you really want out of any system is, does it let me tell the stories I want to tell? If it doesn't, find a new system.
Yep.
Are we sounding better, guys? All
Plays
right,
for a
Furious
bit,
George can hear me.
buffers. And then just repeat.
But the stream plays for a bit, then buffers, then just repeats that. That is...
Literally getting about 3 seconds and then...
Oh, that sucks.
Alright, so I'm going to stop the stream and restart it.
I wonder how that's going to affect the overall recording.
We'll figure it out.
Imagine it'll have to...
I'll do some editing.
Yeah, I meant for the YouTube thing.
Alright guys, we're back. Let's see if this works.
Is that any better, guys? You gotta communicate with us.
It's buffering a little for me, at least on this end.
Now, one of these episodes, we should just do a complete question and answer thing. Those always look fun to me. I think we're starting to get enough of an audience that might work.
Yeah, I'm just going to change
Obviously
my
not.
quality and see if lowering it will help. So, you guys hear us? Are we coming in at all? You hear us? Good. So yeah, I just removed the video.
That's awesome.
The quality you might want to go down on. I don't know what's going on, if there's too many things happening on the Twitch server that's causing problems, but let's see what happens. All right, so where were we? Talking a little bit about campaigns.
I was talking about how I approach creating a campaign. Like,
right.
I get an idea and I run with it, and that's basically it. There's a moment of inspiration in my head, and then I start looking for players to fill that.
Yep.
Put them to work.
Yeah, so from like I said, I try to create a goal, and then I'll start creating, you know, the NPCs associated with it and locations that they need to go. For example, you know, this current campaign that I'm running, and it's not going to be too much of a surprise to the players if I talk about it, or just discuss, some of the NPCs I created. So if you go to my site, there's a campaign that I kind of started writing, which was called the Prometheus Chronicles.
Ooh, that's a cool name.
Yeah. So it is basically an AI he's Pinocchio, right? He's looking to become human for whatever reason.
That is always a good premise.
And how the AI escaped his captivity was he basically took a team of black ops that worked for the company, who basically stole it from the company, and brought him out. And the team was basically sent to go and find that team. So originally I wrote up the whole Black Ops team. I've written up the AI on what the AI is like. And then from there, it was more or less points of time or plot points that I was looking to get to, right? And how to lead the players to find the AI and try to capture it again. And of course, all the Black Ops teams had bounties on them too, so that way, as they kept on killing more of these guys, they were able to collect money. It didn't end well for some players. Luckily, they fought the kind of, I would say, was probably the toughest of the 6 first, and he kind of wrecked the party. Half of the players died within the first 5 minutes of the fight, just because he was the borged out guy.
Yeah.
And then the rest of them, slowly. And of course, when that first part of the campaign happened, they got about halfway through the Black Ops team of killing them off. So there's still 3 remaining, and that's where I picked this new campaign off. Is, hey, still looking for these guys. AI's trying to capture them. The original company that hired them, which was the company who stole the AI, basically suffered from an unknown entity, severe hacks. They blamed the possible AI. However, supposedly the AI was destroyed in an explosion, along with one other member of the Black Ops team. It's still...
Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. So now the team is being hired by another unknown company to basically go and find this, because this AI worked for a bio company, or was used by a bio company to do various research. And that AI has a lot of knowledge and research, under its belt that is still a prize to a lot of different corporations. And of course, back in the original campaign, Arasaka was looking for this thing too. So that's always fun when several different corporations are vying for the same target. And the players are in the middle of it.
To answer your question, George, yes, an all Trauma Team game could work. And in fact, if a character is working for Trauma Team, that's really the best way to do that, is if everybody's working for Trauma Team. As far as what kind of campaign, what kind of plot, if you don't have a plot, if you can't come up with a plot, then my advice is steal one. In the case of, if I were going to run a Trauma Team game, I would take the plot from something like Mother Jugs and Speed, or what was that Nicolas Cage movie where he's an he's an EMS.
Was it Bring Out Your Dead?
Bringing Out the Dead. Yeah, I mean, those are, watch any episode of medical drama. Rescue 911 was a good one. Basically, like the plots can revolve around medical issues. They don't necessarily have to. Just that's your job. Medical shit is your job. That's how you get introduced to the plot elements. The plot elements can be the same as in any other cyberpunk adventure. The only thing that really changes is how you're introduced to them. You come across super secret, formula for new Coke when you arrive on scene to pull a guy out of trouble. There you go. There's the plot. You now have possession of the thing that all the corporations want. Blah, blah, blah. Or you've seen something that you're not supposed to because you had to answer a call.
And the other thing I like to do when starting a campaign is basically run 2 non-related games, right? Basically to bring the party together and get them to have a teamwork type of environment. So for Trauma Team, that's even perfect, right? Because you're going off, hey, first mission, go save this guy. You got to go into, a derelict building that has a bunch of gangers in there, similar to what you have in Cyberpunk 2020 or 2077. The first mission, right, where they're saving that girl from the scabs. Again, you don't need to have mercenaries do it. Trauma Team could do
anything larger. Just has to set up the premise. Although half the time now, I don't even bother with trying to run an adventure where the characters meet each other. Most of the time, I prefer them to just already know each other. It helps because it helps that most of the people I game with know each other anyway. If it's brand new players, if everybody's new to the game, then yeah, run one of those. But if everybody's familiar with everybody, if people have a dynamic, let them build on that dynamic as opposed to basically having to do an origin story every time.
Yep. And I think certain campaigns that you do run kind of fit into having that group dynamic already. For example, Trauma Team, right? Yeah. You all have the same job, right? You might have different roles in that job, but you have that common job. If you do like a Rocker Boy campaign, you can always have the different party members be part of the crew, right? So you can always fit those in. And even like, so you can even with like Black Ops teams, you can have, hey, you guys have been assembled by a corporate, right? Or an exec. And the exec could be a player or the exec could be an NPC. All of them could have been sold out, right? Same with like, law, right? Have a campaign in which the team is basically a special unit within the law enforcement, right?
I've run so many cop campaigns that is basically a specialty of mine at this point.
Yeah. And you can always, there's certain roles that you can't always fit into certain campaigns. My preference is I just don't like rocker boys.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan myself. They have their place.
They do have their place.
Usually that place is NPC territory. I mean, I've run rocker boy campaigns. They were successful. Like, people had a good time playing them, but as a GM, I was not having a good time running it. I can tell you that. It's not my thing.
Well, I remember there was, I don't know if you had that on your site, but remember you writing about how you had you ran a Rocker Boy thing, and it basically was the manager of that was kind of selling drugs or doing some other nefarious things behind the scenes for all these like deadbeat gigs they were going to, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I mean, I'll try and make it work for me. I'll pull any idea out of my ass I can to try and make that work. But at the end of the day, the campaign about musicians just I don't personally. I love music. I if I like a band, I learn everything there is to know about them that I can. But I can't play music. I don't know what it's like to be on a stage. The anxiety of even like trying to, like in high school, having to get up in front of the class. Well, it was not something I did. I mean, I did some low budget movies, but there was never an audience that I had to worry about.
And that's another thing I think when you're dealing with the campaign is, definitely know your players and also tell the players what you're looking for. Some players might come to the table with an idea that might not fit your campaign and might not fit the other players' group dynamic, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, Rocker Boy, that's why I kind of shy away from it, because that's always a tricky character. If I was doing a Rocker Boy campaign, then yes. I would have one or two or three.
I use Interlock Unlimited, so if somebody wants... And using Interlock Unlimited, it means that people can like mix and match and have multiple special abilities, multiple roles. So if somebody wants to play a Rocker Boy, I'm not going to tell them no. I'm going to tell them to try and incorporate that into something that will better fit the campaign. Like if you want to play a performer, that's fine. But that's like the game is not going to center around your concerts. That's not the game I'm running. If you want to, like as a side thing, like if you guys stop, like in the Nomad campaign, if they stop in a town and somebody wants to put on an impromptu show at the bar, like get hired for a gig there, that's more than great. But the game is not going to focus on their musical career. That's just not going to happen.
Yep. And
just be honest and upfront about it.
Yeah. And I think with most roles, you can center a campaign around the role itself. Even Netrunners, especially Netrunners in 2020, I did have a campaign in which I had 3 Netrunners, which was very, very helpful to have, because I didn't have any players sitting around while these guys basically broke into data forts and did all the fun stuff that you can do with Netrunner, and then getting out of the net and dealing with, the selling of the wares and dealing with life in general.
I tell you what, that was one of the main things that led me to create Interlock Unlimited was the role system in regular Cyberpunk kind of limited people and it limited the campaigns you could run. It doesn't make sense to have like in some of the, and I've spoken about this on many occasions, especially with Cyberpunk 2020, some of the jobs, some of the roles, they're full-time jobs. They don't leave a lot of free time for the character to go explore with the other roles. Like a full-time cop doesn't get to hang out 24 hours a day with a rocker and a med tech and a corporate. Like that's just not how that works. Like that cop has a job. He's 9 to 5. He's got to report for duty every day. And unless he's dirty, he's not gonna, which is entirely plausible within Cyberpunk. But most of the campaigns, even the white hat campaigns where everybody's trying to play a good guy in Cyberpunk, you're still going to get involved in illegal bullshit. It's just the nature of the game. It's all about like it may not necessarily be like the theme of cyberpunk is not necessarily heisting and whatnot, but 9 times out of 10 when running a cyberpunk game, it's gonna be about heisting or pulling off some kind of job or another where crimes are taking place. And a full-time cop, he's pretty limited on what he can get away with in that regard without, somebody like snitching on him.
Yep. Yeah, and I've run several times at conventions, so from not necessarily campaign work, but these were basically one-shots. And to me, the best thing about certain one-shots, especially if you're dealing with new players, is you can pre-generate their characters, which is always, to me, helpful when a person's learning the system. Because
that's a good idea.
One problem is when you're introducing a person to a new system, especially something like Cyberpunk, you basically turning on a fire hose and saying, hey, come here, drink. Because the person doesn't know, is this roll right? Is this roll good? Am I putting the skill points in the right? And some of the new players will often do weird things, which often brings good ideas and good moments within a campaign, but oftentimes within a session or two, that player just doesn't like their character because now that they've started playing, they see, oh, I actually really wanted to put more points in this skill and not that skill, because they saw how important certain skills are, and then and because they don't know the game, they did it with style over substance, which is not a bad thing.
I actually take the opposite tact. I prefer to, especially with Interlock Unlimited, but really with any system, I prefer to help run. I actually require that I be there and we create the characters together. That way, as we're going through the process of filling out the character sheet, I can explain to them, what it all means and why this goes here and what that actually does. Character creation is a learning experience as much as it is like just getting your character ready to go.
And it's definitely important for campaign work. And planning out that campaign.
Now, if I'm playing with people who are veterans, absolutely some pre-made characters. That's good stuff. I used to, whenever I'd run a military campaign or any campaign that I expected there was going to be a high body count, we'd have like a stack of pre-made characters, and if your character died, you just pick the one off the top. That worked out pretty well.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I could see that. It kind of reminds
everybody
me of
created like 4 different military characters, all with different specialties and whatnot. And they just all got put into a big pile, shuffled around, and there you go.
Reminds me of that scene from the movie Gamers with the bard.
Yeah, very similar to that. And in fact, might have been where I got the idea.
Genius. Yeah, I mean, with one shot.
It was 100% original. No, I would never steal the ideas like that.
But with one shots and pre-generated characters, the one good thing was I was always able to make sure that the character fit the role and had the skills needed to be there. Now, there was one shot that the 3 times I ran it was great. And I know at cons, at least nowadays they're not too happy about player versus player. But basically, the campaign was a team was to go after a Borg that escaped from Arasaka. Half of the team was Arasaka, half of the team was NCPD with C-SWAT members. And basically, each of them had their own motivation because Militech was looking to steal that Borg. And at the end, and at the end, basically, it turned into a firefight between the NCPD team members and the Arasaka players. And all of them enjoyed that game.
I can imagine. It sounds like an awesome game. You know, after all that I just said, I will say that if I'm playing a system, I'm a hypocrite. If I'm learning a new system, if somebody invites me to play in some other game, I'd rather just like they create a character for me and let me learn as I go along. But that's because I'm lazy, and I'd rather be playing Cyberpunk. It's like my way of holding them hostage. Like, yeah, I'll play this game, but I don't want to mess with character creation. Unless it's Dungeons and Dragons 5e, then holy shit. Good Lord, do I wish we had Cyberpunk Beyond. Holy God. Or more to the case, Interlock Unlimited Beyond. Hint to any coders out there.
I'll try to get my character sheet to integrate the Unlocked. That's in my backlog.
Yeah, you're my hero. I've said that before.
Just got a few other items that I need to kind of deal with. Yeah, but that's kind of what I did with my site. Granted, it doesn't have all the interaction that D&D Beyond has, because there's certain rules that you can't use. But I think Arthouse Orient has been a little lenient on me, which I'm very, very grateful. Thank you, Mike and team.
I think as much as Mike looks at it, as long as you're not trying to make money off them,
yep,
they're pretty much okay.
Yeah.
They are wonderful people like that. Like, they're not open source, but they're very fan friendly. They recognize that their fans have played an important part in promoting their business, and I've always appreciated that about them.
Yep. Capricious, what do you mean by hint, hint? You're asking me?
Oh, yeah, no, I was definitely throwing out some hints.
Oh. Yeah, so... Yeah, I mean, with your system, you know, the only real differences are the combat actions and special abilities, and what special abilities mean. I've been looking at it, thinking about it, and how to put that in the character sheet, right? And giving it an option. Yeah. Again, maybe I'll get to it within the next 2 weeks. Maybe it'll take me a little longer.
What's funny is, like I said when we interviewed Seth, like that's like way back in the early days. That's kind of how we met. Is he created a character generator in addition to like his own personal rules, and he was gonna. There were plans that he was going to do way back when. We're talking like a decade ago. There were plans that he was going to do an Interlock Unlimited character generator. I think I changed the rules too many times, like trying to revise and streamline the system as much as possible. I think I was doing that too often back then for him to do anything, and now, of course, he's way too busy for that kind of shit.
Yeah. Being a full-time author and all. But yeah, what other tips or tricks with a campaign do you do? Like, for me, I always tried to get into, like, you know, mood music and lighting, but I think my problem was my I'm of a generation where don't turn off the lights. I need more lights to read.
I used to run games completely in the dark.
Yeah. And
We had
then
glow-in-the-dark dice and flashlights.
that's sounds a headache onto my eyes.
We were much younger then.
Yeah, obviously.
Occasionally, for the Halloween game, I still do that just to throw the horror, because it's pure horror.
Well, I remember seeing your setup and all like the neon lights you had at that one time.
Oh, I miss the game room so fucking much.
Someday.
Hopefully. Yeah, if you want to know what we're talking about, head to Datafortress2020. In the reference section, there are pictures of my former game rooms, and yeah, they were works of art. I miss them dearly. I now live in a shitty 2-bedroom apartment with my brother. No garage, no space at all. Our living room is tiny. Like, we can fit one couch in here, and that's it. So there is no gaming at my house any longer. It's very sad. But we make do.
So, did you rely a lot on, the music and mood lighting when you played with your players, and did they appreciate it?
The mood lighting was definitely appreciated. Even if we didn't turn off all the lights, we'd have the black light going anyway, so the pages, I got like the brightest bleached paper I could for the character sheets. The pages would glow. We all had glow in the dark dice. I created dice trays and dice boxes for everybody. All their pencils and pens were all fluorescent. Not the writing on them, but the pencils themselves. Yeah, it was the atmosphere was very conducive to playing Cyberpunk. Even on the tabletop it had a glass top, and we'd use highlighter, or not highlighter, the fluorescent markers that like restaurants use.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, for their special of the day, that kind of thing. We used those to make the maps on the tabletop and whatnot. And it was all gridded underneath the glass, so it worked really well. The actual tabletop itself was painted with glowing paint, basically. Music, I tried doing, like, when I was younger, we incorporated music a lot. I talk about music for games. I very much appreciate when I use music as background, for the background of the game. It's always either foreign music or purely instrumental, because you don't want players to get distracted singing along to whatever song is coming on. If they're humming, that's one thing, but like full blown lyrics and all that gets really distracting. So that's my advice as far as music goes. Keep it instrumental. Later on, what I began to appreciate even more than music is if you go on YouTube, there are all these, you can find atmosphere, like busy street, just like hours of listening to somebody set up a microphone and they just recorded a busy street, or a busy street in the rain. There's one for Deckard's apartment from Blade Runner, and it's just like 6 hours of like the ambient background noise in his apartment. Those things are extremely helpful at creating a mood.
Yep.
I downloaded a whole bunch of Hollywood sound effects, and they had things like crowds and like an angry audience that I would play whenever they were like in like a gladiatorial situation or street fight, something like that.
Yeah, so if people do an actual search, I've done a little bit of that, and most of it's like, I think they're called soundboards. There's a few sites out there. One of the sponsors for Cyberpunk. What's that?
Sirenscape does
Yeah.
a soundboard, and they have contracts with Artal. They have official cyberpunk stuff.
Yep. And they're one of the sponsors of Cyberpunk Uncensored. So that's always
I've
place
been
to go.
following Sirenscape for like a decade now. I had one of their very I beta tested for them at some point. I lost contact with them. I didn't follow up with the stuff. I wish I had. But when you lose your game room and all that, you stop worrying about
Mood music.
mood music. It's hard to worry about mood music if you don't have any place to play it. But I highly recommend it for anyone who is interested in adding sound to their campaign.
Yeah. So I guess we're on the subject of tools. So from a tools perspective, whether it's an app or something else that you use to help with campaigns. So for me, I use OneNote and my spreadsheets. I kind of heavily used Roll20 and to kind of use to help me run my current campaign. But
we use Roll20 for the actual maps and the dice rolling. We use Discord for the voice chat. I get most of my maps these days. Google Earth is one of the greatest tools a GM can utilize. You need a map, you can find one you just go to a real life location that seemed interesting to you. There you go. Especially if you're running like a nomad game where it's cross country and I just need a highway, or I need this rural field out in the middle of nowhere. I don't want to search for hours trying to find a pre-made battle map when I can just screenshot Google Earth and throw it down on Roll20 with a grid overlay, and you're good to go.
Yes, Google Map has been a godsend because I actually kind of started using it for the area outside of Night City.
Yeah, exactly.
And just
heck, I used it to create that giant amalgamated map. That's Google Earth, all of it, with the exception of the one area where I used the German version of the Night City map.
Yeah, so I kind of been using Google Earth to kind of plot out some things. And granted, I know like in 2077 they expanded the Badlands, but the way they talk about the LA sprawl and how far it goes. Yep. A lot of that territory that's kind of the Badlands is still a little bit developed. But there's also towns outside. I mean, you go, 50 miles away, 100 miles away from where Night City is, and there's just these small towns out in the middle of what looks like a desert.
I look at the wastelands in Cyberpunk kind of like, the rural areas during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, where everybody moved to the West Coast and they just left these ghost towns all over the place. They still have people live there, but I mean, they're dilapidated. They're not maintained. They're basically just scraping by, trying to eke out whatever living they can. And yeah. Sorry, I did not mean to just totally step on your toes there.
No worries, man. Yeah, I mean, like, there's certain little towns that were outside in that area that I kind of... People are living in there right now, but in Cyberpunk 2020, there's a good chance that they died off. What is it? Like 30% of the population died from the plague or various plagues when the collapse happened. So there is definitely going to be tons of those towns that you can now use and look at and just think about, okay, how to make up an encampment for a nomad campaign, or if the players have to go off and find somebody out in those badland areas. The other thing is generating, secret facilities in those areas as well. Isolated, no one goes to, but there's a small town near it that, the corporation might have used to kind of start as their home base and just grew from there.
Yeah. I mean, there's still stuff happening out there. Not to mention, like, rural America makes a great hiding place. If you can, like, I mean, farming has been taken over by corporations, sure, but the old farms are still out there in the middle of nowhere. And if your character has ever learned anything at all about agriculture, you could make a pretty good life for yourself out there in a lot of the places.
Yep. And another point of advice I would give anybody who's creating campaigns, don't be holding yourself to what's written. Especially in Land of the Free. There's definitely some views of the various states, because in whatever time period that it was written was a perspective of somebody from LA, right? Or not LA, from California.
Berkeley.
Yeah, Berkeley. So keep in mind that anything written there doesn't really hold true to what you would see as how, your hometown would have evolved into, or your home state, because you know better. So if there's anything that you find that you don't like or was written, change it and make it your own. But make sure that the players know that you've changed it if they have those supplements, right? If they don't, that's even better. Because they're none the wiser.
God knows on Data Fortress, I try and keep most of it as compatible with official rules and setting information as possible, but there's just some stuff I don't agree with. I don't agree just because I don't like the idea of it. I don't think that they're going to arm patrol cars. I don't think they're going to stick a machine gun on the roof of, your basic patrol car. I don't think they're going to do that. Are they going to have riot vehicles with that kind of armament? Sure, but not your basic patrol car. I don't think that's going to happen. Of course, now as I get older, I see that, that's much more of a possibility than I thought. But there are things that you're going to find that you don't agree with. Either you don't like the way something was handled, you don't like what's there, or you don't think they went far enough. It's your game. Do with it whatever the hell you want. Never feel like you have to be constrained by what anyone else is doing as far as like the setting material.
Yep.
It's your game. Even if you're running the world that Artal created, it's still your game. You don't have to agree. In my world, we didn't have the Fourth Corporate War. That did not frickin' happen. We didn't nuke Night City. That never happened in my world. Yeah. And my game is run just fine without it. So.
And I think when you do make changes, whether it's to the campaign setting or to your rules, right? So if you come up with any homebrew rules, your main objective is to always be consistent and get the players' buy-in. So if you're trying to do something new, especially with the rules, tell the players first. Say, hey, this rule has bugged me for God knows how long. I want to try something new. Let's try it out for a few sessions. If we like it, we'll mark it up as a home rule or homebrew rule that we'll continue to use. If it doesn't, then maybe it needs a little bit of tweaks, but make sure that you're upfront with the players when it comes to any homebrew rules, and you always want to be consistent with them. Don't say, okay, this only applies to you guys and it doesn't apply to the NPCs.
That's a bad idea.
or you decide to change the rule halfway through combat because it didn't fit with what you were expecting, or it would screw up the story you were trying to create. Now you gotta accept those faults, learn from them, and at the end of the session, then say, hey guys, I think this rule needs to be tweaked a little. What do you guys think of it? And get their feedback.
Alternatively, just like the setting, don't feel like the rules. Don't feel forced to follow the rules for every little minute thing. If a simple GM call gets the job done better than trying to look up a rule, just do that. Don't hold up the game while you look for some obscure rule on how many pebbles a dude can pick up and put in his pocket. Just wing it, and then in your downtime, without calling attention to it, look up the rule on your own and figure it out afterwards. If it's something that's going to absolutely affect the outcome of some important event, sure, look up the rule. But if it's just something silly, just make a call in your head. Don't make a big deal out of it. Don't make a rules lawyer argument about it. Don't suffer rules lawyers ever anyway. Shut that shit down. It's your game. Do with it as you will. The rules are there. They should be respected. But you're the GM. And at the end of the day, it's your job, more so than arbitrating rules, it's your job to move the story along.
Yeah, and if you do have a problem with a rules lawyer in your group, and they start to argue a particular point, you just say, listen, we'll discuss this at the end of the session. For now, let's just do this and move along, right? I'm willing to admit I'm wrong at the end of the session. And yes, there could have been a detrimental effect to your character during the situation. But let's keep the game rolling.
If it's life or death for your character and you've got the fucking rule on hand,
yep,
I'll listen to you. But if you're just going to hem and haw about it, shut the fuck up.
Right. And that's, I think, from rules lawyers, it's always that balance of whether you want them in your game or not. If they are very adversarial, you might want to think about either telling them, hey, I can't take this anymore. If you want me to continue to run a game for you, you need to accept my rules or my ruling. I'm willing to listen at the end and make that compromise. But if they're a constant, distraction within the gameplay, then, it's, to me, it can cause the rest of the group not to have fun, which means, hey, you either need to leave or shut up.
Just like as a player, I'm completely opposed to adversarial GMs. As a GM, if you come in with an adversarial attitude towards me, you're not going to be playing with me very long.
Yep.
That's not fun for anybody. That's not fun for me. That's not fun for any other players listening to you argue with me.
Yep.
There is never a time when I'm going to make you feel like... If at any point I make you feel like you've got to get one over on me, I failed you as a GM, and you should talk to me about it. But I very much strive to never let you feel like that's happening.
So we're at an hour and 40 minutes. What other things do you want to talk about when it comes to campaigns?
The biggest, the most important advice I can give, and I've spoken about it before, when running a game, especially if you have a campaign written out, you may have these big moments that you've plotted out in your head, and you keep putting them off for whatever reason, because you don't feel like the campaign is advanced far enough. You don't feel like the characters have reached the potential where they can handle what's going on. If you've got something cool in your head, play that shit. Don't put it off, because then it'll never happen. You'll never feel like it's ready, and you'll just end up missing out on that potential of what that game could have been. When I was younger, I'd run a game where there was a serial killer in the background, and they'd find little clues, but I'd never let them reach the serial killer himself, because I kept trying to drag it out and make it more important. And I dragged it out so long that eventually they just stopped caring. It stopped being anything they cared about in the slightest. So that whole arc was wasted, and it never lived up to its potential. The big cool moment that I had in my head never happened. It never occurred. If you've got something cool in your head, play it. Don't just sit on it.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Always be aware of stretching out your campaign too far. Yeah, you always want to keep it going, but the players might get tired of never achieving that end goal, and never getting that big payoff. So that's always a problem. The other problem is if you constantly pushing it off, real life can happen. And, all that planning you did, all this epic, enjoyment you were going to plan out, guess what? The party could have fallen apart because someone, got a new job, or someone had to move away. There's various reasons which a party can fall apart, not because of game, but because of real life encouraging. So
yeah, suddenly the game is over, and you've got all the cool shit you had in your head never gets to come out.
Agreed. Yeah.
That took me 20 years to figure out.
Yeah, I can see that. All right, man. I think I'm kind of beat on discussing the campaign. My last bit of wisdom is go and buy Listen Up, You Primitive Screwheads. That is a great
book. Get tired of pimping that book.
Of advice. I'm not going to regurgitate what's in that book, but you should definitely go off and read it. We might do a review of that book in a future session, but for now, I would tell you to go off and get it. It's currently still available, I believe, in our Talsorian store, as well as Drive-Thru RPG. But it is a must-have.
It's one of the books you can actually get fairly reasonably on eBay for originals.
Furious George just pointed out that it's an audiobook.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. They did just put out an audiobook of it. He's right. Thank you, George. They got somebody good to do the voice, too. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, but I'm not big into audiobooks, so I basically have to take other people's word for whether they're good or not.
Yeah, I think the person
I've heard good things about
did it was interviewed by John the Wise.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. I think we can wrap this episode up unless you got more ramblings you want, though.
I can ramble for hours. You know me, but I do think that this is probably we've gone almost 2 hours. That's a pretty good episode. I hope there's no problems with that time that the audio is screwed up. I hope that doesn't create too many problems for the YouTube.
Yeah, we'll see. What I will do is I will fix up what I have because I'm also recording it locally.
Excellent.
And I will get this version at least to Rob so he can post it.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Again, Rob, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rob.
Cyberpunk Uncensored for hosting us, as always. Thanks a lot, pal.
Yep. You can check them out at cyberpunkuncensored.com.
Thanks to everybody who joined us in the chat here, and thanks to everybody who's listening at home.
Yep. You can find me on cybersmily.net. I have a site that is dedicated towards Cyberpunk 2020 in red. Have a bunch of utilities there that you can hopefully use for your games and implement it in better ways.
You can find me at Datafortress2020, the largest, most comprehensive Cyberpunk 2020 site on the planet. Tons of source books that I've written, plus a file archives where I store like most of the greatest, well, really most of everything that's ever been fan sourced for Cyberpunk, all the old fan sites, including most of the best stuff.
Yep.
If you can't find inspiration for your game on my site, then you're not looking hard enough.
Agreed. All right, everyone. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you. Is this the third week? I guess it's going to be the first week in August on a Wednesday.
Much love, people.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.